Hi, my name is Saul, and I've been here in Bloomington since January of 1977. I moved here from Chicago to attend Illinois State University. I worked at UPS for 25 years, so I started working for them in the spring of 77. I became a driver for them in March of 82. So as a driver for UPS, I had to deliver to different locations here in Bloomington, and I had to deliver to the west side of Bloomington, which would be during the day. And a few of the deliveries I had were for Hispanics with Hispanic names, so as I delivered them, they weren't home, so I would leave the package, and I started thinking, well, I wonder how many Hispanics there are here in town. I figured not many, because on weekends I would be around town and never see them. As the years progressed, I ended up delivering in Pontiac, Illinois, so naturally, working 10, 11-hour days, I would never be in Bloomington normal for Monday through Friday. And on weekends, well, I'd end up going to Chicago or Peoria, Joliet, so I was never really around town. So after 25 years in 2002, I left UPS and started as a volunteer at Western Avenue Community Center as an interpreter. And I never realized how many Hispanics were here in Bloomington normal. At that time, even though time had passed since I hadn't seen very many of my fellow countrymen here, I figured that it might be 500 to 700 here. What was I for a surprise, because as I started interpreting around town, I started realizing, not being in town all these years, how many Hispanics there were here. So I figured maybe around 2002 there was approximately maybe 3,000 Hispanics. And then I started interpreting at the courthouse, at the McLean County Health Department, the schools, and it really struck me not only how many were here, but the problems and the difficulties they were facing. And as the years progressed into 2004, 2005, and I started getting to know a lot of the Hispanics who were a lot of repeat clients for me for interpreting, I started getting motivated by some of the injustices that were happening to them with landlords and, their employers, and renting apartments, how things would go wrong, they wouldn't be fixed. So then in October of 2006, I started working at Western Avenue as the interpreter coordinator, and that's where I became more actively involved in trying to help some of these social ills that they were facing, which is never ending, because if it isn't this one day, it's one the next. Here's just a good example of one of the things that I've run into that's very common. The person gets stopped by the police. He shows them his Spanish ID from the consulate, which is a green card, which they passed a law in Springfield, I believe, about 6 years ago that stated that every local law enforcement should acknowledge that card as a proper form of ID, because they don't have social security numbers, and without that, they cannot get a state ID. So not all police officers, just maybe one or two that, a couple of bad apples, they get the card, they say, okay, I'm going to take this with me because this may be illegal and it may be fraud, so we'll mail it to you. Well, in a 2-3 month period, I would get 2 or 3 Hispanics come to my office and say, I never received my card back from the police. I would call the police. They would state that they mailed it. This went on for a few months, and when I really realized that the post office can't be that bad. So I could be wrong here, but I just think that they were the card was probably being thrown away or just cut up, and they weren't getting them. So like I say, it's just a small incident that I happened to notice. But also, there's cases where I have gone to a doctor's office with a patient maybe once every 3 weeks because he had a back injury. And because of the language barrier, the doctor would treat, to me, the symptom and not have the gentleman take any time off. This gentleman worked at a pig farm. So every time he was cleaning the pens, he'd get kind of knocked around by the animals. And when I would go to see the doctor in 3 weeks, the doctor would say, how do you feel? He'd say the same. The doctor would give him an injection and say, come back in a month, but he never gave him any time off of work. And so after 6 months of us progressively doing this, when we went to the doctor basically scolded him and basically was calling him a liar that he was hurt. And that's where sometimes, this is what I tell my interpreters, you have to advocate for the client. And I told the doctor, I said, sir, I'm taking off my interpreter hat, I'm talking to you just as a regular person. I said, how dare you speak to him that way? I said, you have never given him any time off to recuperate after you give him a shot. You just say, go back to work on Monday. And I told him, if this was an American, an Anglo person, you would have said, take 2-3 weeks off of work. Yeah. Why you didn't do that, I don't know, that's your business. I said, but you have no right to speak to him that way. If you can't help find a cure for him or help him alleviate his ailment, then send him to another specialist. And I told him, I said, now I'm taking my cap off and putting my interpreter cap back on. Naturally, I was a bit afraid because I thought he's going to call my boss, he's going to tell her I was out of line, which I don't believe I was. Long story short, he acknowledged what he did. He apologized to the client. I repeated what he said in Spanish to the client. The client said no problem. And it wasn't that I was right. It's just that what I felt was wrong was the way he was dealing with him versus any other patient who spoke the native language of English would have been treated. So we run into these things every day.